says, I don't stand by anything. And then he was talking to Selena Zito and made a bizarre statement or two about the American Civil War and Andrew Jackson. Look at this rambling.
I mean, had Andrew Jackson been a little bit later, you wouldn't have had the Civil War. He was a very tough person, but he had a big heart, and he was really angry that he saw what was happening with regard to the Civil War. He said, there's no reason for this. People don't ask that question, but why was there the Civil War? Why could that one not have been worked out?
Doris, there's so much that we could talk about there. Of course, he's wrong factually, but, you know, people don't ask that question about the Civil War. He's always been a bizarre interview. We know that as well as anybody. But the past, Douglas Brinkley, who we're going to get to in a second here, was talking about the president, his confused mental state. He seems to be getting worse. Have we ever found ourselves in this position?
Well, I don't know. Maybe as an historian, this one just got me. I must say, when I heard, I thought, oh no! The idea that Lincoln wasn't strong, the idea that Lincoln didn't have a bigger heart than Andrew Jackson, and Lincoln somehow got us into the Civil War, but Andrew Jackson would have prevented us when he died in 1845. There was no Civil War in 1845. I mean, true, there were problems over South Carolina and the tariff and the nullification, and he did fine for that. But that's one of the things you learn in school.
He said he was angry.
He was angry about the Civil War. I mean, that was the same thing he'd said a while ago, that Frederick Douglass, an abolitionist, like he was still alive, he said, he's doing good things, Frederick Douglass. You know, the sad thing about it, even if we can smile about this at this moment, is that presidents have to learn from history. It's the way we all learn.
I don't think we can smile.
Well, I don't know what I'm doing.
Okay.
I'm saying, though, Harry Truman would read history all the time. He never went to college, but he read history. When he was going through decision about firing MacArthur, he reads about firing McClellan back in Lincoln's time. When Lincoln is there, he's reading about Washington, he's reading about Jefferson. When Teddy Roosevelt is there, he spends the whole summer reading about Lincoln. And he gets advice from Lincoln when he's involved in this huge coal strike. Presidents have to learn from the past. If we don't learn from the past, we're not getting any wiser. We're not learning anything. But we learn from our parents, our grandparents, and the people who lived before us.
Right, but John Meacham, just to strip this down.
Oh, poor John. He's going to be there. John, tell us.
You can obviously correct all the mistakes, but I want to go something far more elemental than the facts of birthdays and dates of death and beginning of wars.
Right.
A president of the United States who says, hey, nobody's ever asked the question, why did we have a Civil War? Is, again, I know of no adult in my 54 years of living that would ever come close to uttering that question.
You know, it's a projection of the president's fundamental and enveloping narcissism. Because he believes, he told me a year and a half ago or so, a year ago, that, you know, he thought he could have done a deal to have averted the war. So, you know, it's like the scene from The Tempest where Miranda comes out and says, "Oh, brave new world that has such people in it," and her father says, "'Tis new to thee." You know, he's in an enforced, you know, as Doris knows, the presidency itself enhances your fundamental characteristics. It's very hard once you're there to change. Some people do, and that's why we talk about them as great presidents. But most people, once they're in the Oval Office, actually just become more like themselves. And I think in this case, that's on a potentially tragic trajectory.
Robert Costa, can you speak to the Republicans' frustration about this president and the flip-flops on North Korea, going from a major war to saying, sure, I'd love to meet, I'd be honored to meet with the president of North Korea. The flip-flops on health care, his inability to understand exactly what's going on with health care. His flip-flop on NAFTA, in the morning saying he's going to get out of NAFTA. He's shown a map in the afternoon and changes his opinion on NAFTA. The pace seems to be quickening. He's always been erratic, but is there growing concern on the Hill that they're just not going to get things done as long as this president is this erratic?
Joe, as I met with a group of Republican lawmakers last night, through the course of my reporting, I asked them about foreign policy, and there's not only concern, there's a feeling of disorientation. They look at his actions in terms of Syria and the strikes there. They saw perhaps President Trump moving in a more traditional Republican conservative direction, developing some kind of doctrine on foreign policy. Then they hear these statements and they think that the president, as he was during the campaign, is still attracted in spirit to some of these strong men, totalitarians and dictators, and it's raising major concerns among Republicans and Democrats on Capitol Hill about the consequences for U.S. foreign policy.
Yeah, I will tell you, for better or for worse, and no matter what people have thought along the way, we have known this man for a very long time, and we're not seeing the same guy here.
Really? You think it's gotten worse?
Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
Especially after taking a short break.
A lot worse.
And then coming back.
A lot worse.
This is not funny.
Well, he
it's
lives
not
in
even,
the present.
I can't even.
It's like he lives in the present, so that's the only moment that matters. So whatever happened in the past, whatever he said 2 weeks ago, this is the moment. But then you never know that moment's not going to change.
There's a lack of self-control.
But my mother
seems...
lives in the moment too, and I'm not saying that Donald Trump has dementia. But my mother has dementia. She lives in the moment. She forgets what she said a day ago, a week ago. We can't have presidents that do that. And I'm not saying that he has dementia. I will leave that to his physician to figure that out.
Something is wrong. And to the point where you can't even have a bigger debate, excuse me, Joe, about the issue at hand that he's talking about because he's nonsensical. Like, that's what congressmen, Republican congressmen, and everybody who's backing up here have to keep in mind as they think about the decisions they're going to make moving forward. Are you going to stand by this guy? Because he's nowhere. He doesn't stand by anything. And I'm quoting him right now.
I stand by nothing. Flip-flop on North Korea. Flip-flop on NAFTA. Flip-flop on health care. Flip-flop on everything. And often, it's not a day or a two or a week. It's just hours apart, these flips. And there's nobody inside the White House, is there, that can actually rein this in at all?
Well, there certainly doesn't seem to be. I mean, I think one of the most telling things over the course of the past 2 weeks or so was when he sat down with those reporters from Reuters and handed them the 2016 election map. And I think the lesson that he's learned over the past 2 years...
Could you set that up?
Certainly.
For everybody
yes, certainly.
That was
made a big impression on me.
That was an extraordinary moment as well.
Right. Yeah, so he's meeting with the reporters from Reuters, and they're having a conversation about his presidency. And at one point, he has a stack of electoral maps from 2016, and he hands it out to the reporters and says something along the lines of, "Isn't that beautiful?" Or, just sort of reinforcing the point that I won this map.
Do you have these? Ask, do you have these? Right. Have you seen these?
Right. And I think that what that reinforces is, for the course of 2 years, as he was running for his campaign, a year and a half, he was flip-flopping all over the place, right? And he never stood by any position. The comment that he made to Dickerson about not standing by anything does apply more broadly to his political views. And I think he sees that map as validation that that's okay. Right? And I think that part of the issue is now he's in the White House and he has this validation. The American people agreed with the way that I approach politics. And I think that to him reinforces the idea that how he does things is okay.
But that doesn't make any sense. I mean, think about it.
Of course it makes no sense, because that is what happened on a day in November when he lost the popular vote by 3 million to perhaps
and then forced his press secretary to lie about the crowd size.
The worst opponent that anybody's run against in modern history, political opponent. But the polls do impact him, Mark Halperin.
He's got a low approval rating, historically low for a new president, and he's in a tough position right now where you'd like to think a president could have a comeback, but if he can't figure out how to solve health care and tax reform right now, like in the next couple of weeks, he may see his major legislative efforts halted at the hands of his own party, not trying to work with the other party, and then what does he do? There's a lot of pressure on him right now.
So, Margaret Talev, here's what the president told you about North Korea.
If it would be appropriate for me to meet with him, I would be honored to do it. Most political people would never say that, but I'm telling you, under the right circumstances, I would meet with him.
Margaret, is there some context we're missing there? What do you make of it?
You know, we got the idea to ask him this question because last week we saw some of that signaling from the State Department, from Tillerson, the idea that the U.S. may be interested in potentially some direct talks with North Korea, and because we knew that President Trump, you know, both in private life and as president, puts a lot of value on personal relationships. When I asked him the question, there was like a moment where you could tell he was thinking about it, and then he said what he said, and then he said, "We're breaking news." So I think what he said was deliberate, and I think that he knew that it would be controversial. And of course, the question is why? Was he trying to send a signal inside the U.S.? Was he trying to send a signal to North Korea? Was he trying to send a signal to President Xi? The rest of the context that might be useful is that he went on to talk about how he was meeting with Mahmoud Abbas at the White House this week, and then said, well, you probably don't think that's as big a deal. I mean, of course it's not. Mahmoud Abbas is the leader of the Palestinians, and where the U.S. is involved in talks with the Palestinians and the Israelis. So he recognized it was different, but that seems to be the continuum that he's thinking of is, hey, I meet with a lot of people because I think that I can have a personal impact on situations that are difficult to resolve.
Of course, Doris Kearns Goodwin, right after FDR said, a day which will live in infamy, he turned back to the speaker and said, we're breaking news.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.